The smoke cleared from the bridge of the Indomitable, revealing the nightmare that Kim Tae-ho had feared most. Red warning lights painted everything in blood, and the steady beep of dying systems filled the air like a funeral song. Through the cracked view screen, he watched the last human battleship explode in a ball of fire and metal. "Sir, we're the only ship left." The voice belonged to Lieutenant Park So-jin, her hands dancing over the engineering console even as she delivered the terrible news. Her face was streaked with grease and blood, but her eyes still held hope. Tae-ho gripped the captain's chair until his knuckles turned white. 200 souls. That was all that remained of the mighty Seventh Fleet. 200 humans against an empire that controlled half the galaxy. The smart choice was clear. Run back to Earth, report the defeat, and let someone else figure out what to do next. But Kim Tae-ho had never been smart. He had been lucky, brave, and stubborn. Today, he would need all three. "So, Jin, how bad is our damage?" he asked, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. The young engineer wiped sweat from her forehead. "The main engines are dead, but I can get us moving on backup power. Life support is stable for now. The real problem is weapons. We've got maybe enough firepower to handle a scout ship, nothing bigger." "What about the alien wrecks out there?" "So," Jin looked up in surprise. "Sir?" Tae-ho pointed at the view screen where dozens of destroyed Vorthak. Ships drifted in the void. The enemy had won this battle, but they had paid a price. Their advanced technology floated among the debris, waiting for someone bold enough to claim it. The Vorthak use energy weapons we've never seen before. Shields that can stop our best missiles. If we could figure out how their tech works... That's crazy, sir, interrupted Captain Lee Han-sol from across the bridge. The Marine commander's armor was scorched from the boarding action that had saved the bridge. "We don't know anything about alien technology. It could kill us all." Tae-ho smiled for the first time in hours. "Han-sol, we're already dead. The Vorthak will hunt down every human ship in space. Earth's defenses won't stop them for long. Our families, our children, everyone we've ever loved, they're all going to die unless we do something impossible." The bridge fell silent except for the hum of emergency power. Everyone knew he was right. The Seventh Fleet had been humanity's best hope, and it was gone. Earth's politicians would surrender rather than watch their cities burn. That left only desperate choices. "So what are you thinking, sir?" So-jin asked quietly. Tae-ho walked to the view screen and pressed his hand against the cold metal. "We salvage everything we can from those wrecks. We learn how their weapons work. And then we find people crazy enough to use them." Han-sol frowned. "What kind of people?" "The kind that regular armies don't want. Criminals, mercenaries, anyone who has nothing left to lose." Tae-ho turned back to face his crew. "We're going to build something new. Not a fleet that follows rules and fights fair. Something that fights to win, no matter the cost." Over the next 3 days, the Indomitable became a scavenger ship. So-jin led teams in bulky spacesuits through the twisted remains of Vorthak vessels, cutting out power cores and weapon systems with careful precision. Every piece of alien technology was a puzzle that could either save humanity or explode in their faces. The breakthrough came when So-jin managed to connect a Vorthak energy core to their ship's power grid. The lights on the bridge suddenly burned, brighter than they had since the battle. Computers that had been running on emergency power came back to full life. "This is incredible," she whispered, staring at her readings. "One of their power cores produces more energy than our main reactor. And look at this. Their weapons don't use ammunition at all. They just need power." Tae-ho nodded slowly. Unlimited firepower, as long as they had energy. It was exactly what a small force would need to fight a much larger enemy. Hit hard, hit fast, and disappear before the enemy could respond. But first, they needed that small force. The Indomitable limped toward the edge of human space, staying far from regular shipping lanes. Tae-ho sent coded messages to contacts he had made during his years of service. Not to fellow officers or government officials, but to the shadows where desperate people lived. The first to answer was Nam Ki-woo, a former Marine who had been court-martialed for killing prisoners during the Centauri War. He arrived in a stolen freighter with 30 other outcasts, all of them eager for a chance to fight again. "You're really going to war against the entire Vorthak Empire?" Kai-woo asked as he toured the modified ship. His scarred face showed no fear, only hunger. "Not war," Tae-ho corrected. "Revolution. We're going to teach the galaxy that humans don't give up. Ever." More ships arrived over the following weeks, pirates who had been driven from their bases by Vorthak expansion. Soldiers dishonorably discharged for being too violent. Scientists whose experiments had been banned by ethics committees. They all had different reasons for joining, but they shared one thing. They had nothing to lose. Dr. Choi Min-ho was perhaps the strangest recruit. The former government researcher had been imprisoned for experimenting on volunteers, trying to enhance human physical abilities. When Tae-ho offered him freedom in exchange for his knowledge, the thin man had smiled like a hungry wolf. "You want me to make your soldiers stronger, faster, more resistant to damage?" Min-ho asked as he examined the alien technology So-jin had salvaged. "I want you to make them something the Vorthak have never seen before," Tae-ho replied. As their hidden base in the asteroid field took shape, word spread through the criminal underground. The crazy human commander who was building an army to fight aliens. Some called it suicide. Others called it the only real chance humanity had left. Yoon Da-yoon arrived with intelligence stolen from government databases. The former spy had been burned by her own agency when a mission went wrong, leaving her for dead on an enemy world. She brought maps of Vorthak supply routes and the locations of their forward bases. "They think they've already won," she told Tae-ho as they studied the star charts. "Their patrols are getting lazy. They're more worried about governing their new territory than watching for threats." "Good," Tae-ho said. "Arrogance will be their weakness." By the end of the month, nearly 500 humans had joined what people were starting to call the Black Legion. The name had come from their modified armor, painted black to hide in space, covered with alien technology that glowed with strange colors. Standing on the bridge of his transformed flagship, Tae-ho looked out at the growing fleet. Converted cargo ships bristled with salvaged weapons. Modified fighters tested alien propulsion systems that left trails of exotic energy. In the training bays, his soldiers learned to use technology that regular humans had never even seen. They were ready for their first real test. "Sir," So-jin called from her station. "Long-range sensors are picking up a Vorthak convoy. 3 cargo ships with a light escort heading for the Kepler system." Tae-ho smiled. The revolution was about to begin. 6 months had passed since the last stand at New Busan, and the asteroid base looked nothing like the empty rock it had once been. Tunnels carved deep into stone-housed workshops, where human engineers worked alongside salvaged alien computers. The air hummed with the sound of construction, and the glow of exotic energy lit corridors that had never seen sunlight. Kim Tae-ho walked through the main hangar, watching his people prepare for what would become the Legion's defining moment. 5,000 soldiers now called this place home, each one carrying scars from their past and hope for their future. They had come from prisons, from failed colonies, from the dark spaces between stars where society's outcasts made their homes. "The bioenhancement process is ready for final testing," Dr. Choi Min-ho announced as Tae-ho entered the medical bay. The thin scientist stood beside a tank filled with glowing blue liquid, his eyes bright with excitement. "The Vorthak used genetic modification to make their soldiers stronger. I've found a way to do the same for humans, but better." Inside the tank floated samples of human tissue, changed by alien science into something new. The cells moved faster, healed quicker, and showed resistance to damage that would cripple normal people. "What are the risks?" Tae-ho asked, though he already knew the answer. Everything they did carried risk now. Some subjects may reject the treatment. Others might experience changes in personality. The enhancement affects the brain as well as the body. Minho's voice carried no apology. But the volunteers understand. They want to be stronger. Nam Ki-woo stepped forward from where he had been watching. The former Marine's scarred face showed no fear, only determination. "I'll go first, sir. My squad is ready too." Tae-ho studied the man who had become one of his most trusted leaders. Ki-woo had proven himself in training, showing the other outcasts that their past failures didn't define their future. If anyone could handle the enhancement process, it was him. "Do it," Tae-ho decided. The process took 12 hours. Ki-woo lay unconscious in the medical pod while alien technology rewrote his genetic code. His heart rate spiked and dropped as his body adapted to changes that should have been impossible. When he finally opened his eyes, they glowed with a faint silver light. "How do you feel?" Minho asked, recording everything. Ki-woo sat up slowly, then moved with speed that blurred the air around him. His fist struck the reinforced wall beside his bed, leaving a dent in metal that should have broken human bones. "I feel hungry," he said with a grin that showed teeth slightly sharper than before. "When do we fight?" The first volunteers had been soldiers, but soon others wanted the enhancement too. Engineers who could work longer without rest, pilots whose reflexes could match alien technology. Even some of the support staff chose to undergo the process, knowing that everyone in the Legion might need to fight before their war was over. Not everyone survived the changes. Some bodies rejected the alien modifications, leading to painful deaths that Minho recorded with cold scientific interest. Others came through the process changed in ways that went beyond the physical. They moved differently, thought differently, and looked at their unenhanced comrades with eyes that held alien hunger. "We're creating something new," Yoon Da-eun observed, as she watched enhanced soldiers train in the combat bays. The former spy had chosen not to undergo enhancement herself, preferring to keep her human perspective clear. "The question is whether we're creating heroes or monsters." Tae-ho watched. Kai-woo's squad moved through a training exercise designed to simulate boarding a Vorthak ship. They moved like predators now, coordinating without words and striking with precision that no human army had ever achieved. When the exercise ended, they looked to him with expressions that mixed loyalty and something wilder. "Maybe both," he answered Da-eun quietly. The Legion's first real combat test came when they intercepted the Vorthak convoy near Kepler Station. 3 massive cargo ships surrounded by escort fighters, carrying supplies and weapons to reinforce enemy positions deeper in human space. Tae-ho led the attack personally, commanding from the bridge of the Indomitable while his enhanced soldiers prepared for boarding actions. The plan was simple: strike fast, take everything useful, and disappear before reinforcements could arrive. "All ships begin the attack," he ordered. The Legion's modified vessels swept down on the convoy like hunting wolves, salvaged Vorthak. Weapons tore through enemy shields while human tactics caught the aliens completely off guard. Instead of standing and fighting like proper warships, the Legion ships darted in and out of combat, never staying in one place long enough to be targeted. Effectively, "Their escorts are breaking formation," reported Communications Officer Jang Mi-young. "The cargo ships are trying to run." "Nam Ki-woo, your teams are cleared for boarding," Tae-ho commanded. The enhanced Marines launched from modified shuttles, using alien technology to burn through the hulls of enemy ships. What they found inside changed everything the Legion thought they knew about their enemy. "Sir, you need to see this." Ki-woo's voice crackled over the comm system. His squad had taken control of the lead cargo ship's bridge in less than 10 minutes, moving through Vorthak defenders like they were standing still. The cargo holds contained more than supplies. Thousands of prisoners from dozens of different alien species filled cramped cells, being transported to Vorthak slave worlds. Some were soldiers captured in recent battles. Others were civilians taken during planetary conquests. They're not just conquering territory, Da-Un realized as she studied the prisoner manifests. They're harvesting entire civilizations. Among the prisoners, they found members of species that had never been seen before. Refugees from worlds so distant that human astronomers hadn't even detected their suns. Each group told the same story. The Vorthak Empire swept across their homes like a plague, taking everything of value and leaving empty worlds behind. "How many species have they destroyed?" asked Dr. An Subin, a xenoarchaeologist who had joined the Legion after her research station was attacked. Her gentle voice carried horror at the scale of destruction they were uncovering. "Too many to count," answered one of the prisoners, a tall being with crystalline skin who called himself a Zephyrian. "My people fled to the edge of the galaxy, but even there we are not safe. They follow us like death itself." Teho made a decision that would define the Legion's future. Instead of simply taking the supplies and leaving, he freed all the prisoners and offered them a choice: join the fight against the Vorthak, or be transported to neutral space where they could try to rebuild their lives. Most chose to fight. The Zephyrian refugees brought knowledge of energy shield technology that was more advanced than anything the Vorthak used. Other species contributed weapons, tactics, and intelligence about enemy movements across the galaxy. Within days, the Legion had grown from a human resistance movement into something much more dangerous. "We're not just fighting for Earth anymore," Teho told his officers as they planned their next operation. "We're fighting for everyone the Vorthak have enslaved or plan to enslave. That makes us responsible for a lot more than revenge." Park So-jin looked up from the alien technical manuals she had been studying. "The Zephyrians say their homeworld was protected by an energy barrier that could stop entire fleets. If we could learn to build something like that, one step at a time," Teho cautioned. "First, we need to prove that a mixed force can work together. Humans, Zephyrians, and whoever else we pick up along the way." The proof came sooner than expected. A Vorthak patrol fleet arrived at the convoy's last known position, hunting for whoever had dared to attack their supplies. Instead of running, Teho chose to fight. The battle lasted 6 hours and proved that the Legion had become something unique in the galaxy. Human tactics combined with alien technology and the desperate courage of species fighting for survival. Enhanced soldiers boarded enemy ships while Zephyrian energy weapons overwhelmed Vorthak shields. When the fighting ended, 2 enemy cruisers had been captured and 3 more destroyed. More importantly, they had sent a message that would spread across the galaxy. The Vorthak Empire could be beaten. Their victims could fight back. And somewhere, in the dark spaces between stars, a new kind of army was growing stronger every day. Standing in the captured bridge of a Vorthak cruiser, surrounded by beings from a dozen different worlds, Teho realized that his desperate gamble had succeeded beyond his wildest hopes. The Black Legion was no longer just humanity's last chance. It had become the galaxy's first real hope for freedom. The trading station Kepler-7 floated in neutral space like a massive metal flower, its arms reaching out to welcome ships from across the galaxy. For decades, it had been a place where different species could meet safely, protected by ancient treaties that even the Vorthak Empire respected. Today, it would host negotiations that could change the course of the war. Kim Tae-ho stood at the viewport of his shuttle, watching the station grow larger as they approached. Beside him, Ryu Jae-sung adjusted his diplomatic uniform nervously. The former ambassador had joined the Legion after Earth's government branded him a traitor for suggesting they should fight rather than surrender. "Remember, they don't trust us yet," Jae-sung said quietly. "The Zephyrians we rescued told them about the Legion, but stories and reality are different things. What exactly are they afraid of?" asked Shinbora from the pilot's seat. The young woman had proven herself to be one of the Legion's best pilots, able to fly anything with engines and some things that shouldn't have been able to fly at all. Enhanced humans with stolen alien technology, led by someone who used to be a criminal, Taeho answered with dark humor. When you put it that way, we do sound pretty scary. The docking bay they entered was larger than most ships, designed to accommodate the massive vessels that different species used for interstellar travel. Their shuttle looked tiny beside the organic-looking Zephyrian cruiser that was already docked nearby. The meeting took place in a neutral conference room, under the watchful eyes of the station's peacekeeping robots. The Zephyrian delegation consisted of 3 beings whose crystalline skin reflected the room's lights in beautiful patterns. Their leader, who called herself High Counselor Lyra, studied the humans with eyes that held both hope and suspicion. Your Legion freed many of our people from Vorthak slave ships, she began, her voice carrying musical tones that no human throat could produce. For this, we are grateful. But gratitude does not mean alliance. We have heard disturbing reports about your methods. Tae-ho had expected this. What kind of reports? Enhanced soldiers who show more aggression than normal humans. Ships that attack without warning and take no prisoners. Some call you heroes. Others say you are becoming like the enemies you fight. Jae-sung leaned forward slightly. High Counselor, we understand your concerns. The Legion has had to make difficult choices to survive. But our goal has always been to free the enslaved, not to conquer them. Pretty words, said another Zephyrian. But we have seen what happens when species become desperate. The Morkadi were peaceful traders before the Vorthak attacked their homeworld. Now they are pirates who prey on refugee ships. The negotiations might have ended there, but an emergency alert interrupted the discussion. The station's alarms wailed as sensor displays showed a dozen Vorthak ships dropping out of hyperspace around Kepler 7. This is supposed to be neutral territory, Lyra said, her crystalline features showing shock. Tae-ho was already moving toward the door. The Vorthak don't care about treaties anymore. They're getting desperate too. In the docking bay, chaos ruled as different species tried to evacuate their ships before the enemy could attack. The Vorthak fleet had positioned itself to block all escape routes, clearly planning to capture everyone on the station. Bo-Ra, get our shuttle ready, Tae-ho ordered. Jae-sung, contact the Legion fleet. Tell them we need backup immediately. Sir, our ships are 6 hours away, Jae-sung reported after a tense moment. The station's defenses won't last that long. Tae-ho looked across the bay at the Zephyrian cruiser. Its crew was preparing to undock, but their ship would never make it past the Vorthak blockade alone. Sometimes the best way to build trust was to act without thinking about the consequences. Bo-Ra, dock our shuttle with their cruiser. We're going to help them fight their way out. Sir, that's crazy, she protested. Our shuttle has almost no weapons. But it has something better. It has us. The next few minutes tested every skill that Shin Bo-Ra had learned as a pilot. She brought their small shuttle alongside the much larger Zephyrian vessel, while both ships were still inside the station's protective barriers. Magnetic clamps locked the 2 hulls together just as the first Vorthak attack began. This is High. Counselor Lyra, came the transmission from the cruiser. Human ship, what are you doing? Helping, Tae-ho replied simply. Your ship has better shields and weapons than we do. Our ship has better engines and someone who knows how the enemy thinks. The combined vessels launched from Kepler 7 just as Vorthak fighters began strafing the station's outer hull. The Zephyrian cruiser's energy shields deflected the first wave of attacks while Bo-Ra pushed their engines beyond safe limits. They're trying to box us in, she reported, her hands dancing over controls that were a mixture of human and alien technology. 3 heavy cruisers moving to intercept. Can your people target their shield generators? Tae-ho asked Lyra over the comm. Our weapons are designed for defense, not attack, she admitted. We are not warriors. Then let us handle the fighting. Just keep those shields up." What happened next became legend among both species. The tiny shuttle detached from the Zephyrian cruiser and dove toward the nearest enemy ship like an angry insect attacking a giant. But this insect carried enhanced human soldiers armed with salvaged Vorthak weapons. Kang Dong-hyun, the Legion's weapons specialist, had spent months studying captured enemy technology. He knew exactly where to place explosives to cause maximum damage to a Vorthak cruiser's power systems. When the shuttle's boarding party cut their way inside the enemy ship, they moved with the precision of enhanced reflexes and the fury of people fighting for their friends. "Shield generator destroyed," Dong-hyun reported 15 minutes later. "This ship is dead in space." The Zephyrian cruiser's weapons, designed for precise defensive work, proved devastatingly effective against an unshielded target. The disabled Vorthak ship exploded in a ball of fire that lit up the entire system, but the victory came at a cost. The shuttle had been damaged during the boarding action, and its life support was failing. Bo-Ra barely managed to dock with the Zephyrian ship before the small vessel's atmosphere ran out completely. "Why did you risk your lives for us?" Lyra asked, as human and Zephyrian medics worked together to treat the wounded. "We had not yet agreed to any alliance." Tae-ho, nursing a broken arm from the boarding action, met her crystalline gaze steadily. "Because that's what people do for each other, and because we need allies who remember what it means to be civilized." The rescue of the Zephyrian delegation changed everything. Within days, representatives from a dozen species arrived at the Legion's asteroid base, all wanting to discuss possible alliances. The Zephyrians shared their advanced energy shield technology, while other species contributed their own innovations. Dr. Choi Min-ho found himself working with alien scientists who had their own ideas about genetic enhancement. The Crystari, a species that looked like living metal, had developed ways to integrate technology directly into biological tissue. The Verdani could accelerate healing by controlling plant-like growths that functioned as living medical devices. "We're not just building an army anymore," Park So-jin observed as she watched humans and aliens work together in the engineering bays. "We're creating something completely new." The first joint operation came 3 weeks later. Intelligence from Yoon-da-yoon's spy network had located a Vorthak slave processing facility on the edge of their territory. Thousands of prisoners from dozens of species were being held there, waiting to be shipped to labor camps deeper in enemy space. The assault force that hit the facility was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Human soldiers enhanced with alien biology fought alongside Zephyrian energy weapon specialists and Crystari warriors whose metallic bodies could resist most conventional weapons. Verdani healers kept everyone fighting even after injuries that should have been fatal. "The facility is secured," Nam Ki-woo reported from the surface. His squad had evolved since their first enhancement, developing tactics that combined human cunning with abilities that no single species possessed. 15,000 prisoners freed, and we captured their entire database of slave transport routes. But the real victory was what happened after the fighting ended. Instead of simply freeing the prisoners and leaving, the combined force worked together to establish a permanent base on the liberated world. Former slaves became citizens of a new kind of society, one where species differences were seen as strengths rather than barriers. "This is what we're really fighting for," Tae-ho told his officers as they watched humans and aliens work together to build homes and schools on the recovered world. Not just freedom from the Vorthak, but freedom to create something better than what came before. The Vorthak Empire had ruled through fear and division, keeping different species apart so they couldn't combine their strengths. The Legion was proving that cooperation could be more powerful than conquest. Every world they liberated became a beacon of hope, showing others that the enemy could be beaten. But success brought new challenges. The Vorthak High Command had noticed the growing rebellion, and they were preparing to respond with the full might of their war machine. Admiral Vextar, their most feared military leader, was already assembling a fleet to crush the Legion before. The deep space sensor array hidden in the Tau Ceti asteroid field had been quiet for months, monitoring Vorthak fleet movements across 3 sectors. Today, it screamed warnings that chilled the blood of every human who heard them. Admiral Vexatar's Shadow Fleet had finally left its home port, and it was heading straight for Legion territory. Kim Tae-ho studied the tactical displays with growing concern. 50 capital ships, each larger than anything in the Legion fleet. Escort vessels numbering in the hundreds. Support craft carrying enough firepower to sterilize entire worlds. The Shadow Fleet was the Vorthak Empire's ultimate weapon, deployed only when they wanted to make examples that would terrify other potential rebels. "How long until they reach our outer positions?" he asked. Oh Hyun-woo, the navigation officer, whose intuitive understanding of hyperspace routes had saved them countless times. Hyun-woo's fingers danced over his instruments, calculating possibilities that existed more in feeling than mathematics. 48 hours if they take the direct route. But, sir, Admiral Vextar isn't known for being predictable. He might come at us from 3 different directions, or he might try to trap us against the galactic rim. What do our spies tell us? About him? Yoon Da-eun stepped forward with a datapad full of intelligence reports. The former spy had built a network that reached deep into enemy territory, using rescued prisoners and sympathetic aliens to gather information that could keep the Legion alive. Vextar is old, even by Vorthak standards. He's been commanding fleets since before humans discovered fire. Never lost a major battle, never retreated from a fight, and never shown mercy to defeated enemies. She paused, studying the holographic image of their enemy. But he's also proud. He believes that superior firepower can solve any tactical problem. Tae-ho smiled grimly. Pride and overconfidence. Those were weaknesses he could work with. All fleet commanders, this is Tae-ho. We're implementing Dispersal Protocol 7 immediately. Scatter the fleet across 12 systems. Maintain radio silence, and be ready to move at a moment's notice. The next few days tested every skill the Legion had developed. Their ships vanished into the dark spaces between stars, hiding in asteroid fields and nebulae where sensors couldn't find them. The alien refugees who had joined their cause proved invaluable, sharing knowledge about hiding places and safe routes that even the Vorthak didn't know about. Jang Mi-young, the communications officer whose code-breaking abilities had evolved beyond human norms, worked tirelessly to intercept enemy transmissions. Her enhanced neural implants, a gift from Crystari allies, allowed her to process encrypted data streams that would have taken normal computers hours to decode. "I'm picking up Shadow Fleet communications," she reported after 3 sleepless days. "They're frustrated. Vextar expected to find us massed for battle, not scattered like this." What's their response? They're splitting up too. Smaller task. Forces hunting through systems where they think we might be hiding. But, sir, this is our chance. Divided forces are vulnerable forces. Tae-ho had been thinking the same thing. The Shadow Fleet's greatest strength was its massive firepower concentrated in one location. Spread out across dozens of systems, those same ships became individual targets that could be overwhelmed by focused attacks. "Contact Shin Bo-ra. I want our fastest strike teams ready to move." The hunter-killer operations began at dawn on the 4th day. Bo-ra led a squadron of modified fighters against a Shadow Fleet destroyer that had been investigating the ruins of an abandoned mining station. The enemy ship never saw them coming, using a combination of Zephyrian cloaking technology and human stealth tactics. Her fighters appeared from the sensor shadow of a dead planet and struck like avenging angels. Dong-hyun's jury-rigged weapon systems, powered by salvaged Vorthak energy cores, punched through enemy shields with devastating efficiency. "Target destroyed," Bo-ra reported as the enemy vessel broke apart in a cascade of explosions. "No distress. Signal sent. They never knew what hit them." Similar attacks struck Shadow Fleet forces across 6 different systems. Small Legion task forces appeared without warning, destroyed their targets, and vanished back into hiding before reinforcements could arrive. Each victory was minor compared to the enemy's overall strength, but together they began to erode Vextar's confidence. "He's recalling his scattered forces," Da-Un reported after intercepting another enemy transmission. "Vextar is pulling the Shadow Fleet back together, but he's angry. Our hit-and-run attacks are humiliating him in front of his subordinates." "Good," Tejo said. "Angry enemies make mistakes." The mistake came when Vextar decided to make an example of New Harmony, a recently liberated world where humans and aliens had been building a new society together. Instead of hunting the Legion fleet, he would destroy something they cared about and force them to come to him. The trap was obvious, but Tejo had no choice but to spring it. 50,000 civilians lived on New Harmony, including many of the refugees the Legion had rescued. He couldn't abandon them, even if it meant fighting the entire Shadow Fleet in a conventional battle. "All ships, converge on New Harmony," he ordered. "Maximum speed." The Legion fleet that assembled in the New Harmony system was the largest force they had ever fielded. 200 ships from a dozen different species, crewed by beings who had learned to fight together despite their differences. Enhanced human. Soldiers worked alongside Zephyrian energy weapon specialists. Crystari engineers maintained systems that combined the best technology from across the galaxy, but they were still outnumbered 3-1 by an enemy that had never lost a battle. "Sir, the Shadow Fleet is dropping out of hyperspace," reported Lieutenant Bae Sung-min from his fighter cockpit. The young pilot had volunteered for the dangerous reconnaissance mission that would give them their first look at Vextar's full strength. The enemy formation that appeared on their screens was a work of art designed for destruction. Massive dreadnoughts, arranged in perfect geometric patterns, surrounded by layers of escorts and support vessels. Every ship bristled with weapons that could crack planets. "This is Admiral Vextar," came the transmission on all frequencies. The Vorthak commander's voice carried the confidence of someone who had crushed 1,000 rebellions. "Surrender now, and I will make your deaths quick. Continue to resist, and I will turn your precious world into an example that will be remembered for 10,000 years." Tejo opened a channel to reply. "This is Kim Tejo of the Black Legion. We've got a counteroffer. Surrender to us, and we'll let you live long enough to see your empire fall." The battle that followed would be studied by military historians for generations. The Shadow Fleet attacked with overwhelming force, expecting to crush the rebellion in a single decisive engagement. But the Legion didn't fight like a conventional fleet. Instead of meeting the enemy head-on, they scattered into small groups that darted between the massive enemy ships like angry wasps. Enhanced pilots flew maneuvers that should have been impossible, guided by reflexes that had been improved beyond human limitations. Alien technology allowed for tactics that the Vorthak had never encountered. "Their big ships can't target us effectively," Bo-Ra reported as her squadron wove through a formation of enemy cruisers. "We're too small and too fast, but sir, we're not doing enough damage to their major units." That was when Hyun-Woo proved why his intuitive navigation skills were worth a dozen conventional officers. "Sir, I've been tracking their fleet movements. Vextar is positioning his ships according to a classical Vorthak battle formation. If we can get a strike team to coordinate 347 Mark 12, there's a gap in their defenses that leads straight to his flagship. The gap was barely large enough for a single ship, and it would only exist for about 10 minutes before the enemy formation shifted. But 10 minutes was enough for someone crazy enough to try. "Nam Ki-woo, take your enhanced marines and prepare for a boarding action," Tejo ordered. "You're going to capture Admiral Vextar." "Sir, that's insane," Kai-Woo replied, but his voice carried excitement rather than fear. "I like it." The modified assault ship that carried Ki-Woo's team was barely larger than a shuttle, designed for speed rather than protection. It slipped through the gap in the enemy formation like a blade between ribs, guided by Hyun-Woo's impossible calculations and Bo-Ra's reckless piloting skills. The Vorthak flagship's hull, was 2 meters of hardened metal designed to resist the largest weapons in the galaxy. Kiwu's enhanced soldiers cut through it in 3 minutes using tools that combined human engineering with alien science. What they found inside changed the course of the battle. Admiral Vextar was not the invincible warrior that propaganda had painted him as. He was an old being, kept alive by technology and sustained by fear of his own superiors. When enhanced humans appeared on his bridge, moving faster than his guards, could react, he surrendered rather than face the death he had given to so many others. "Shadow Fleet, this is your admiral." Vextar's voice carried across all frequencies, but now it shook with defeat. "Stand down! The battle is over." The sight of their invincible leader being led away in chains broke the Shadow Fleet's morale. Ships that had been fighting with desperate fury suddenly found reasons to withdraw. Within an hour, the largest fleet in Vorthak history was retreating in disorder. The medical bay on Harmony 3 smelled of antiseptic, and something else that Song Ye-jin couldn't identify. It was the scent of change, of biology pushed beyond its natural limits. She moved between beds filled with enhanced soldiers who had survived the battle against the Shadow Fleet, but survival came with costs that were only now becoming clear. "Doc, I can't sleep," muttered Corporal Im Woo-jin from his bed near the window. The former prisoner had been one of the first volunteers for Dr. Choi Min-ho's enhancement program, and the results had made him into something that barely looked human anymore. His skin had taken on a metallic sheen, and his eyes glowed with silver light even in daylight. "When did the nightmares start?" Ye-jin asked, checking his medical readings. Heart rate elevated, brain activity showing patterns she had never seen in normal humans. The enhancements that made him faster and stronger were also changing how his mind worked. 3 weeks ago. I dream about the battle, but it's different. I remember enjoying it too much. I remember wanting to keep fighting even after the enemy surrendered. Woo Jin's voice carried shame that cut deeper than any physical wound. "What? Are we becoming, Doc?" Ye-jin didn't have an answer. She was a combat medic, trained to patch wounds and keep soldiers alive long enough to fight again. Nobody had prepared her for dealing with enhanced humans who were struggling with changes that went far beyond the physical. Captain Lee Han-sol found her an hour later, sitting in her office and staring at reports that painted a troubling picture. The Marine commander looked older than his years, worn down by battles that seemed to multiply faster than they could be won. "How bad is it?" he asked, settling into the chair across from her desk. 40% of the enhanced soldiers are showing signs of psychological stress, increased aggression, difficulty relating to unenhanced humans, and something the Crystari psychologists are calling predator fixation. They're starting to see everyone as either prey or competition. And the ones who haven't been enhanced? They're afraid. Not of the enemy, but of their own comrades. Some are requesting transfers to all human units. Others are volunteering for enhancement just so they won't feel helpless around the changed soldiers. Han Sol rubbed his temples, trying to ease a headache that had been growing for weeks. "Taeho wants me to recommend more soldiers for the enhancement program. The war's escalating and we need every advantage we can get." "At what cost?" Ye-jin challenged. "We're creating super soldiers who might not be able to live in the peaceful galaxy we're fighting to create." The conversation was interrupted by an emergency alert. Fighting had broken out in the refugee settlement on the planet's surface, and medical teams were needed immediately. What they found there would haunt both officers for the rest of their lives. The settlement had been a model of interspecies cooperation, with humans and aliens working together to build homes and schools on the liberated world. Today, it looked like a war zone. Enhanced human soldiers stood over the bodies of Zephyrian civilians, their silver eyes reflecting no emotion at all. "They attacked us," insisted Sergeant Ko Yun-ji, an enhanced soldier whose report made no sense. "The Zephyrians were planning to poison the water supply. We had to stop them. But there was no evidence of any poison, no weapons found among the dead civilians." The Zephyrians had been guilty of nothing more than existing in the same space as soldiers whose enhanced senses had interpreted normal alien pheromones as signs of aggression. Dr. Choi Min-ho arrived within the hour, his scientific curiosity overriding any concern for the human cost of his work. He examined the enhanced soldiers with the same detached interest he might show for interesting bacteria. "Fascinating," he murmured as he studied Yoonji's brain scans. "The enhancement process has altered her threat assessment patterns. She's seeing enemies everywhere because her modified instincts can't properly interpret alien behavior patterns." "Can you fix it?" Han Sol demanded. "Fix it? This isn't a malfunction. It's evolution. These soldiers are becoming something new. Something better adapted for warfare than baseline humans." Min-ho's eyes lit up with the fervor of a scientist who had discovered something remarkable. "With a few more modifications, we could eliminate these social attachment issues entirely." "You want to remove their humanity," Yejin said quietly. "Turn them into perfect weapons that don't care who they kill." "I want to win the war," Min-ho replied. "Sentiment is a luxury we can't afford." When facing extinction, the argument that followed echoed similar debates taking place across the Legion fleet. Enhancement had given them the power to stand against the Vorthak Empire, but it was also changing them into something that their former enemies might recognize. The question was whether they could win the war without losing their souls in the process. Commander Kim Tae-ho stood in the observation deck of the Indomitable, looking down at Harmony 3 and thinking about choices that couldn't be undone. The planet's surface showed the scars of their victory: crashed ships, ruined cities, and refugee camps where survivors tried to build new lives from the ashes of the old. "Sir, we have a problem," reported Yoon Da-un as she joined him at the viewport. The intelligence chief's expression was grim, which usually meant bad news was coming. "The Zephyrian Council is threatening to withdraw from our alliance. They say our enhanced soldiers are becoming as dangerous as the enemies we're fighting. 3 more species are reconsidering their support." "What about the worlds we've liberated?" "Mixed reactions. Some are grateful enough to overlook the problems. Others are starting to wonder if they've just traded one set of oppressors for another." Da-Yoon paused, studying Tai-ho's reflection in the transparent metal. "The enhanced soldiers see themselves as protectors, but they're protecting people who are increasingly afraid of them." The breaking point came during a routine patrol mission near the edge of Legion space. A squadron of enhanced pilots encountered a group of Vorthak refugees, civilians fleeing the chaos that was spreading through their empire as more worlds rebelled. Under normal circumstances, the refugees would have been captured and questioned, then either recruited or relocated to neutral space. Instead, Lieutenant Lim Ha-na and her squadron destroyed the refugee ships without warning. When questioned later, she showed no remorse or understanding of why her actions might be problematic. "They were Vorthak," she said simply, her silver eyes reflecting no emotion. "Vorthak are the enemy. We kill enemies." "They were civilians," Han Sol pointed out. "Families with children. Vorthak children grow up to be Vorthak soldiers," Ha-na replied with the logic of someone whose empathy had been surgically precise. "I prevented future casualties. The tribunal that followed split the Legion's command structure down the middle. Some officers argued that Hana had acted within the parameters of their mission. Others insisted that murdering refugees was exactly the kind of atrocity they were fighting to prevent. Dr. Ko Eun-ji, the civilian researcher who had been documenting the war's psychological impact, provided testimony that chilled everyone who heard it. The enhanced soldiers are losing their ability to see other beings as individuals. They're developing the same dehumanization patterns that allow genocide. If we don't address this immediately, we risk becoming the very monsters we set out to destroy. The solution, when it came, was as brutal as it was necessary. Tae-ho made the decision that would define his legacy and split the Legion into factions that would take years to heal. Effective immediately, all enhanced soldiers will undergo psychological evaluation and retraining. Those who cannot adapt to rules of engagement that protect civilians will be removed from active duty. We will not sacrifice our humanity for military effectiveness. The announcement triggered the closest thing to a mutiny that the Legion had ever experienced. Nearly a third of their enhanced soldiers refused to submit to evaluation, claiming that their modifications made them better judges of military necessity than unenhanced humans. Nam Ki-woo found himself caught between loyalties that pulled him in different directions. He was enhanced, but he was also human enough to understand why people feared what they were becoming. "Sir, some of the enhanced want to form their own units," he reported to Tae-ho privately. "They say they can fight more effectively without having to worry about protecting people who don't understand the necessities of war." And what do you think? Ki-woo was quiet for a long moment, studying his reflection in the polished metal of the commander's desk. "I think we're becoming something that our families wouldn't recognize. Maybe that's necessary to win, but maybe winning isn't worth it if we lose ourselves in the process." The crisis reached its climax when a group of enhanced soldiers attempted to take control of a Legion base, claiming that unenhanced humans were no longer qualified to make strategic decisions. The brief firefight that followed pitted enhanced against enhanced, with Kai-woo leading the loyalists against rebels who had once been his brothers in arms. When the shooting stopped, 17 enhanced soldiers were dead, and the Legion's unity lay in ruins. But they had established a principle that would guide them through the rest of the war. Power without accountability was tyranny, regardless of who wielded it. The dead world of Nexus Prime had been lifeless for 10,000 years, its surface scoured clean by weapons that had turned continents into glass. But beneath the radiation-blasted wasteland lay secrets that would change everything the galaxy thought it knew about the Vorthak Empire and the civilizations that had come before. Dr. An Subin knelt beside the entrance to what had once been a massive underground complex, her instruments detecting metal alloys that shouldn't have existed. The xenoarchaeologist had spent her career studying dead civilizations, but nothing had prepared her for what they were finding on this forgotten world. "The construction is incredible," she told Commander Kim Tae-ho over the comm system. "These walls are made from materials that are harder than anything we've ever seen, and they're covered with symbols that don't match any known language." Above ground, Hong Shok-jin maintained a security perimeter with a squad of enhanced soldiers. The security chief had volunteered for this assignment personally, knowing that ancient ruins often contained unpleasant surprises. His enhanced senses picked up traces of energy that suggested the complex below was not as dead as it appeared. "Doc, be careful down there," he warned. "My scanners are showing power signatures that are still active after 10 millennia. Whatever built this place had technology that makes ours look primitive." The expedition had come to Nexus Prime following intelligence gathered from captured Vorthak databases. References to the predecessor failure and the cycle of cleansing had appeared in several enemy documents, suggesting that the Empire's conquest of the galaxy was not their first attempt at universal domination. Lim Hana, working as the team's technical specialist despite her recent psychological evaluation, managed to interface her enhanced neural implants with what appeared to be an alien computer system. The connection sent waves of information directly into her brain, data streams that would have overwhelmed a normal human mind. "I'm seeing historical records," she reported, her voice strained by the effort of processing alien thoughts. "The Vorthak Empire has risen and fallen multiple times over the past 50,000 years. Each time they conquer most of the galaxy, and each time something stops them." "What stops them?" Tae-ho asked. "Other species learn to work together. They develop technologies and tactics that the Vorthak can't counter. Eventually, the Empire collapses and the Vorthak retreat to their core worlds to rebuild." Hana paused, her enhanced eyes glowing brighter as more information flowed through her consciousness. "But sir, there's something else. The records show that every previous resistance was eventually corrupted by the very power they needed to win. The deeper they went into the complex, the more disturbing the revelations became. The predecessors had been an alliance of species, much like the Legion, united by necessity and enhanced by technologies that pushed biology beyond its natural limits. They had won their war against an earlier Vorthak expansion, driving the Empire back to its home systems and establishing a golden age of peace and cooperation. But victory had come with a price that echoed the Legion's own struggles. The enhanced warriors who had won the war found it difficult to return to peaceful lives. Some had become tyrants, ruling over the species they had saved. Others had simply vanished into deep space, unable to find purpose in a galaxy that no longer needed their particular talents. "Look at this!" Subin called from a chamber filled with crystalline structures that pulsed with stored energy. "These are memory cores, containing the personal accounts of individual predecessor soldiers. We can actually experience their thoughts and emotions." The memories were disturbing in their familiarity. Enhanced beings struggling with changes they couldn't undo. Civilians afraid of their own protectors. Political divisions that tore apart alliances that had seemed unbreakable during wartime. "It's like looking into a mirror," Hana observed after experiencing the memories of a predecessor warrior whose enhancements had been remarkably similar to her own. They faced the same choices we're facing now. But the most shocking revelation came from the deepest levels of the complex, where the predecessors had built weapons designed specifically to counter Vorthak advantages. The technology was beyond anything the current galaxy had imagined. Devices that could disrupt the neural, networks that allowed the Vorthak to coordinate their vast fleets, weapons that could target the specific genetic markers that made their species so effective at conquest. "This changes everything," Tejo said as he studied the weapon specifications. "With these designs, we could end the war in months instead of years." "At what cost?" Subin asked quietly. "The predecessors built these weapons, but they also built safeguards to prevent their use. The records suggest they were horrified by what they had created. The safeguards were elaborate and clearly designed by beings who understood the temptation of ultimate power. The weapons could only be activated by a consensus of at least 7 different species, and their use required the unanimous agreement of the command structure. Even then, they were programmed to self-destruct after a single use, ensuring that no one could become addicted to the power of genocide. But there were other discoveries that painted an even darker picture of what victory might bring. In the final chambers of the complex, they found evidence of what had happened to the predecessors after their war ended. Without a common enemy to unite them, the alliance had fractured along species lines. The enhanced warriors had become warlords, ruling over fragmented territories. Within a few generations, their golden age had collapsed into chaos and mutual destruction. "The cycle repeats," Hana said as she absorbed the final memories stored in the complex. "Species unite against the Vorthak, develop the power to defeat them, then destroy themselves with that same power. The Vorthak wait for the chaos to end, then begin their expansion again." "Not this time," Tejo said firmly. "We know about the cycle now. We can break it." "Can we?" Subin challenged. The predecessors probably thought the same thing. They left these records as a warning, but they couldn't escape their own nature. The argument that followed would define the Legion's approach to the rest of the war. Some officers wanted to use the predecessor weapons immediately, arguing that ending the conflict quickly would save countless lives. Others insisted that building weapons of genocide would make them no better than their enemies. Hong Seok-jin found himself in the unexpected position of mediating between factions that were splitting along predictable lines. Enhanced soldiers generally favored using every available weapon, while unenhanced humans and their alien allies urged caution. "Maybe the real test isn't whether we can build these weapons," he suggested during one heated debate. "Maybe it's whether we can choose not to use them." The decision, when it came, satisfied no one completely. The Legion would study the predecessor technology and adapt what they could for defensive purposes, but the ultimate weapons would remain sealed unless the survival of multiple species was at stake. It was a compromise that left everyone feeling like they had given up something important. But the discoveries on Nexus Prime had revealed something more valuable than weapons. The predecessors had also developed technologies for removing enhancements safely, for helping modified beings return to something resembling their original nature. It was knowledge that could heal the psychological wounds that were tearing the Legion apart. "We don't have to choose between being human and being strong enough to protect others," Dr. Choi Min-ho admitted after studying the predecessor medical records. The scientists' enthusiasm for unlimited enhancement had been tempered by seeing what had happened to previous generations of enhanced beings. "We can find a middle path." Standing in the ruins of a civilization that had faced the same choices they were facing, Taeho realized that knowledge was more dangerous than any weapon. They now knew that their war was part of a cycle that had repeated for millennia, that victory could be as destructive as defeat, and that the galaxy's history was littered with the remains of species who had tried to break free from patterns. That seemed inevitable, but they also knew that others had come close to succeeding. The predecessors had lasted for generations before their alliance collapsed. Some of their enhanced warriors had found ways to live peacefully among the people they had once protected. The cycle could be broken, but only by beings who understood the price of both victory and defeat. The war against the Vorthak Empire would continue, but now they were fighting for something more than freedom. They were fighting to prove that intelligence could overcome instinct, that cooperation could be stronger than conquest, and that the cycle of civilizations could finally be broken by beings wise enough to learn from the mistakes of the past. The revelations on Nexus Prime had given them hope, but hope was only the beginning. The real work of building something better than what had come before was just starting. The fleet that assembled at the edge of the Mordegal system was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. 50,000 ships from over 200 different species, united under the banner of the Black Legion and carrying the hopes of countless worlds that had dreamed of freedom for generations. Commander Kim Tae-ho stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, surrounded by holographic displays showing the positions of Allied fleets spread across 3 light-years of space. Each dot of light represented not just a ship, but a story of species that had overcome their differences to stand together against an enemy that had seemed invincible. "Final fleet reports coming in," announced Admiral Kwon Tae-young from his flagship, the Liberation. The former Earth Defense Force officer had proven himself to be a gifted fleet commander, able to coordinate the complex movements of ships that operated by dozens of different tactical doctrines. "All task forces are in position. We're ready to begin the assault." The Vorthak homeworld of Mordegal Prime hung in space like a malignant jewel, its surface covered by cities that housed billions of beings who had never known anything but conquest and domination. Around it orbited defense platforms that could destroy entire fleets, protected by shields that had never been breached in 50,000 years of warfare. But the Legion's attack would not rely on brute force alone. Intelligence gathered by Yoon Da-yoon's network had revealed the locations of hidden bases and secret facilities that the Vorthak had never expected anyone to find. More importantly, they had learned how to turn the Empire's greatest strength against itself. "Seo Min-jun is in position," Da-eun reported from the intelligence center. The operative had spent months infiltrating Vorthak command networks, using technology adapted from predecessor ruins to blend his enhanced human capabilities with alien stealth systems. "He's ready to begin disrupting their communications on your signal." The battle plan was ambitious beyond imagination. While the main fleet engaged the orbital defenses, smaller forces would strike at the industrial worlds that supplied the Vorthak war machine. Enhanced soldiers, led by Nam Ki-woo, would assault key installations on the planet's surface. And at the center of it all, a desperate gamble that would either end the war or doom the galaxy to another cycle of conquest and resistance. Park Ji-hoon, report on ground forces, Tae-ho requested. The ground commander's voice carried the confidence of someone who had spent years preparing for this moment. 40,000 troops ready for planetary assault. Mix of enhanced humans and allied species, all trained in urban warfare against Vorthak positions. We've identified 17 critical targets that need to be taken simultaneously. But the real key to victory lay not in superior numbers or advanced technology, but in something the Vorthak had never learned to counter: the willingness of different species to sacrifice themselves for each other's freedom. The attack began with a deception that had taken months to prepare. A fleet of converted cargo ships, crewed by volunteers from every allied species, approached the Vorthak defenses, broadcasting surrender codes and offering to negotiate humanity's capitulation. The enemy, confident in their superiority, allowed the ships to approach their orbital platforms. The explosions that followed lit up space for millions of kilometers. Each cargo ship had been packed with predecessor technology designed to overload Vorthak shield generators. The seemingly hopeless gesture of surrender had been a Trojan horse that eliminated half of the planet's orbital defenses in a single devastating moment. "Now!" Tae-ho commanded. The real assault began as thousands of ships dropped out of hyperspace around Mordegal Prime. Zephyrian energy weapons combined with human tactics and Crystari technology to create a coordinated attack that struck from 17 different directions simultaneously. Shin Bo-ra led a squadron of modified fighters through the debris of the destroyed platforms, her enhanced reflexes allowing her to navigate obstacles that would have been impossible for normal pilots. Behind her came the assault transports carrying Ji-hoon's ground forces, protected by Verdani living armor that could adapt to enemy weapons in real time. Breakthrough achieved at Landing Zone 7, Ji-hoon reported as his troops fought there, way onto the planet's surface. Meeting heavy resistance, but were advancing toward the primary command center. The battle in space was equally intense. Admiral Kwon Tae-young commanded the Allied fleet with skill that turned their numerical advantage into tactical superiority. Ships that had never worked together before moved like parts of a single organism, each species contributing their unique strengths to a coordinated assault. "Their second defense line is collapsing," reported Communications Officer Jang Mi-young, her enhanced neural implants processing data streams from across the battlefield. "Enemy fleet elements are retreating toward the inner system." But the Vorthak had one final surprise waiting. As the Legion fleet pressed their attack, massive ships began emerging from hidden bases on the planet's moons. These were not ordinary warships, but vessels designed specifically to counter the tactics that had made the Legion successful. "Sir, we're detecting some kind of neural disruption field," warned Oh Hyun-woo from his navigation station. "It's affecting our enhanced soldiers. They're losing coordination." Across the fleet, enhanced humans began experiencing the same disorientation that had plagued them during their worst psychological episodes. The Vorthak had developed weapons that targeted the modifications that made Legion soldiers so effective, turning their greatest strength into a crippling weakness. "All enhanced personnel, withdraw to shielded areas immediately," Tae-ho ordered. But it was too late for many of them. Enhanced pilots lost control of their fighters. Enhanced Marines found themselves unable to function in combat. The Legion's most effective troops were being systematically neutralized by an enemy that had finally learned to counter their advantages. That was when the unenhanced humans and their alien allies proved that courage didn't require genetic modification. Regular human pilots took over from their enhanced comrades. Alien soldiers who had been considered support troops stepped forward to lead assaults that enhanced Marines could no longer complete. "This is Lieutenant Song Ye-jin," came the transmission from one of the medical ships. "Our enhanced soldiers are stabilizing in the shielded compartments, but they can't participate in the final assault. It's up to the rest of us now." The irony was not lost on anyone. The Legion had begun with enhanced humans leading unmodified allies. Now, at the moment of ultimate victory, It would be won by beings who had chosen to remain true to their original nature. On the planet's surface, Ji-hoon found himself leading troops who had to overcome obstacles that enhanced soldiers had been designed to handle. Regular humans and aliens working together, using intelligence and cooperation instead of superior physical abilities. Target 17 is secured, he reported after a firefight that had lasted 6 hours. We have control of the planetary defense network. One by one, the critical installations fell to forces that succeeded through teamwork rather than individual enhancement. The Vorthak, who had built their empire on the idea that superior beings should rule inferior ones, found themselves defeated by the very cooperation they had always dismissed as weakness. The final breakthrough came when Seo Min-jun completed his infiltration of the Vorthak command network. Using skills learned from human intelligence agencies and enhanced by alien technology, he had worked his way to the very heart of enemy communications. "I'm in their central command system," he reported. "I can broadcast a surrender order using the Emperor's own codes. But, sir, once I do this, there's no going back. The Vorthak will know they've been beaten by beings they considered inferior." "Do it," Tae-ho ordered. The transmission that went out on all Vorthak frequencies was brief and devastating. "This is Emperor Morthak. The war is over. All Vorthak forces will lay down their arms and submit to Legion authority. The age of conquest has ended." Across the galaxy, Vorthak fleets that had been fighting desperately suddenly found themselves without orders or purpose. Some refused to believe the transmission was real. Others, exhausted by years of warfare against an enemy that refused to be conquered, welcomed the chance to stop fighting. The battle for Mortagal Prime ended not with a final explosion, but with the quiet surrender of beings who had finally learned that their way of life was unsustainable. The Vorthak Empire, which had dominated the galaxy for millennia, dissolved in a matter of hours. Standing on the bridge of the Indomitable, as enemy ships powered down their weapons and requested safe passage to neutral space, Tae-ho realized that they had accomplished something that the predecessors had never managed. They had won the war without losing themselves in the process. The enhanced soldiers were beginning to recover as the Vorthak neural disruptors shut down, but they returned to a fleet that had proven it could function without them. The balance between enhanced and unenhanced, between human and alien, had been tested in the crucible of ultimate battle and found to be strong enough to build a future on. "Sir, we're receiving surrender requests from Vorthak commanders across 17 sectors," reported Daun. "The Empire is collapsing faster than we anticipated." 5 years had passed since the fall of the Vorthak Empire, and New Geneva looked nothing like the emergency military headquarters it had once been. The former Legion Command Center had grown into a proper capital city, with wide boulevards where beings from hundreds of different species walked together in peace. Chancellor Kim Tae-ho stood at the window of his office in the Galactic Council building, watching the morning traffic flow through streets that had been designed to accommodate everything from human-sized pedestrians to the massive Torani who needed roadways built for creatures the size of small buildings. "The Centauri delegation is here for the morning session," announced his aide, Yang Soo-jin. The former Legion soldier had traded her combat armor for the formal robes of a diplomatic assistant, but her enhanced reflexes still made her move with the fluid grace of someone who had been modified for warfare. "How are they adjusting to civilian life?" Tae-ho asked, as he always did when he saw one of his former soldiers struggling with the transition to peace. Soo-jin paused at the door, her expression thoughtful. "Some days are better than others, sir. The enhancements make it hard to find a place in a world that doesn't need warriors anymore. But the rehabilitation programs are helping. Most of us are finding new purposes." The rehabilitation programs had been one of Tae-ho's first priorities after the war ended. Using knowledge recovered from predecessor ruins, Legion medical teams had developed ways to safely reduce or remove the modifications that had been necessary during the fighting. Not all enhanced soldiers chose to undergo the process, but having the option had made the difference between successful reintegration and a generation of warriors with no place in a peaceful galaxy. The Galactic Council session that morning dealt with issues that would have been unimaginable during the war years. Trade disputes between species that had once been too busy fighting for survival to engage in commerce.